Okay, so we're following up with yesterday's lesson where we started looking at uh, other types of data, right? So visual data and bringing those like text together with with numerical data, right? We talked about quantitative and qualitative information. Qualitative is when it describes the quality of something, right? And that's usually text. Quantitative deals with numbers. So, and I'm in the wrong, let me get in the right place here. And we started looking at those types of data, right? We looked at a map on sort of the aging population in the US and some other graphical data. So this really continues that lesson by what it's saying is communicating data. So how, if you are, if you're faced with both numerical data, with that quantitative data and qualitative data, if you have some text, and how sort of like are you going to express that in your own words? So it's translating this information that's more so visually in this. We're relying more on the visual side of things. There's going to be a little bit of text here and there, and also mathematically, and then relating that. So taking the visual data, the quantitative data, and turning it into qualitative information for somebody else. So if you were, encounter some type of data that you want to explain to somebody. So let's take a look here at our lesson.
Hi there. This is the lesson on communicating data. This lesson will teach you how to translate text into quantitative data and how to translate quantitative data into words.
Right. All right, let's go.
You and I live in the information age. That means we're constantly surrounded by data. My phone lets me track my steps, the weather, the news, pretty much anything I care about, I can monitor with my phone. I myself am also represented by data. I have a social security number, a phone number, and an employee number. My height, weight, and age are all numbers, all data stored in databases. Modern American life runs on data. Data in its raw form can be pretty intimidating. Look at this spreadsheet, rows and columns full of numbers. What about this pie chart? There's a lot of stuff happening here too. And this diagram, I'm not even sure what this is supposed to be saying. It's easy to see why some people might feel overwhelmed. How are you supposed to use all this information when there's so much of it out there? My advice? Don't worry about how intimidating the data looks. Data isn't supposed to make sense on its own. Data only makes sense in the context of a prompt or question. A prompt helps you focus on specific information within the data. Here, let me show you what I mean.
Just, does everybody have this assignment? Is it showing up for everybody? Okay. Nilda, after the lesson plays, before we actually start the questions, I'll make sure that it's assigned to you. So just bear with us, listen to the lesson, and then we'll get you straightened out. Okay. So moving on.
Look at this table. It compares data for 2 different cities. The table also gives 2 years' worth of information, so you can compare the cities over time. By itself, this data doesn't really mean anything. It's just raw information without any context. I need a prompt to make sense of it. So let's say I'm trying to answer the prompt. Explain in complete sentences which city experienced the greatest increase in young adults between 2012 and 2016. So the prompt is asking me about population and median age. Since the prompt doesn't ask about median income, I can cross that data out. It isn't relevant to the prompt. I start off by looking at population increases. Both cities increased their population between 2012 and 2016. City B, however, grew much faster than City A. I'll make a note of that. Now, let's look at median ages. City A actually grew older. That's not what the prompt is looking for. City A is not the answer. City B, on the other hand, experienced enormous growth. City B's median age also dropped 6 years during the same time period.
Okay, so just to slow that down a little bit, right? We talked about median age. That was one of the things that we talked about yesterday. Is that statistic of median, which is basically the number that falls in the middle of a set of numbers. So just like the median in the middle of the road, right? This is the middle sort of value. So they're showing there that top part of the table. You see 2012. So data in both cases from City A, City B, in that brown kind of color is from 2012. And you comparing just that raw data, you see that in both cases, both cities grew. City A marginally, right, only about 8,000, and City B much more so at about 100,000. And then next, we look at the median age. So comparing those two, we see City A, the median age went up about 3 years, right? So the median age of the adult living in that city is 35 by 2016. However, the other city dropped substantially by about 6 years. So you could also use this to imply that a large part of that 100,000 new residents of that city were younger.
B is the answer I'm looking for. The prompt asked me to use complete sentences, so now I have to explain my findings and how it applies to the prompt. This is what I call telling the story. So here's the story. Both cities saw a population increase between 2012 and 2016. City B experienced both population growth and showed a decrease in median age. This suggests that City B's new residents were younger than average, bringing down the median age. The answer is City B. Now it's your turn. Let's see if you can use the data to tell a story.
Okay, so this is basically what you're doing. You're turning visual data into text. Now, of course, there's still quantitative items in there, right? We talked about sort of quantitative terms like median, and we do have some numbers represented. But how do you express just raw information? And of course, part of that is determined by what are you being asked, or what information do you want to derive from that. So let's say you were looking at the moving to one of those two cities, that might be information relevant to you as far as do you want to live in a city with a younger population, or an older population, or median income, things like that. When we moved to the Columbus area out of Athens, the data that we looked at, one of the most important things to us was the school district we would be in. So we had to look at basically raw data. And of course, a lot of what you're going to find on the internet, related to that will already be, they've derived that information and accumulated it for you, and makes it easier. Like you typed in, what are the best school districts in Franklin County or the Columbus area, and then it's going to give you, that information. But we also looked at different types of numbers to see where we might want to decide to move. And of course, another big number of that was what we could afford. So more quantitative data to consider. Okay, yeah, so we'll look at the passage here. So which response answers this prompt? In complete sentences, right? That's what we're working with here. Explain which factors increase or decrease the poverty threshold. So pull up this table here. And this one, this one is just, it's bizarre. And this comes from the U.S. Census Bureau. So this is official information and their guidelines. So of course, poverty the level of poverty, if you're is the level at which you can meet your basic needs, right? If you live in below poverty level, then you can't meet your basic needs. That's the definition by the Census Bureau and by other government bureaus. The threshold is one sort of metric. There's also like a poverty guideline that's a little bit different. Okay. All right, Nelda, that's fine. We'll catch up with you. I'll put that assignment on and you can go to, and the assignment will be on Google Classroom for you. So anyway, so it's based on a lot of that data that they compile is for one, based on household size. So what we have here, you'll see, our y-axis going up and down here on the side, total family size, and it goes from 3 to 9 plus members in your household. The x-axis across the top, right? So is family members under 18 years of age. And of course, our title here, 2017 poverty thresholds, the PT, right? That's their shorthand for poverty threshold for families of 3 or more with up to 5 children. There's some other data out there, but this is, mostly what you're going to see. It's adjusted annually with inflation. So, it'll be different today than it was in 2017. Some years will go up, some years will go down. It's also just kind of ridiculous. We can point that out that even at a family of 3, $19,000 is just, that's almost an impossibility to meet all your basic needs with 3 people living in your household making $19,000. But again, I don't set the standards; the U.S. Bureau does, and of course those types of numbers are what help you get qualified for certain types of benefits and things, right? The other odd thing about this table, and I pointed this out to my wife when we were actually scratching our heads, because if you'll notice, so for example, that first line, a family household of 3 members, okay? So at 0 members under the age of 18, right? So there's 3 adults. Let's say you have, a couple and their adult child, like an 18, 19-year-old, whatever it may be. The poverty level there is $19,000 per year, right? That's annual. One family member under 18, $20,000. 2 members under 18, $20,000. So if you had, say, a single parent, you had children that were grade school age or, just under 18, right? So you have single parent, 2 children in the household, $20,000. Here's where it starts getting weird. And I can't figure out why this is. So if you look at a household of 4 members, right? So 4 people in the family, 0, 18 years or older, 25,000. 1 under the age of 18, 26,000, and then it starts going back down for some reason. So 25,000 for 2 children, 25,000 for 3 children, and then you see that trend continue for the rest of the chart. So same thing, 5, right? So it's 30,000 for 5 household members, and it increases by 30 to 31,000, but then it starts going down the more children you have in there. And I just saw my video freeze. I hope everybody can still hear me. Okay. And this just doesn't make sense to me because, as all of you know, your parents, you're taking on that economic burden for your children. So you would think that the poverty level, the threshold would increase with the number of children that you have. If there's 4 people in the household and 2 of those are children, there's hopefully 2 parents who are working. Those children are not working. They have their own economic, healthcare, school, all these other things that the parents have to deal with. They're not earning money. So I don't understand why that threshold doesn't continue to go up instead of down. Why would it be easier? Why would you need less money if you have 5 kids in your house and you're the single parent? It doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, that is, for whatever reason, that's how the Census Bureau calculates it. So the poverty threshold here, that's sort of my tangent for the day. It just doesn't make great sense to me. But it does increase with the amount of individuals in the house, right? So that first number does increase. So if, for 3 people in the household, it's 19,000. If you have 9+ people in that same household, the poverty threshold is $54,000. You need a minimum of $54,000 to meet all of your basic needs for 9+ people living in your household, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Okay, so that's the information we're looking at. And so how then do we state that in a sentence, right? Or in multiple sentences? So what we have here are in our 4 choices. So the correct answer, right? As families grow larger, so does poverty threshold. Each additional child, however, decreases it, right? So that's what I explained. I don't know why that is. Right? Again, it doesn't make sense to me, but that is the best explanation for the data that we have, right? If you look at the other options here, poverty threshold is affected by both the number of family members and the number of kids. That isn't a great explanation. It is affected, basically, but that doesn't, it increases. We want a little more specific information there. And it's only after the first child does it actually start to decrease. The second option, each additional family member, but also the number of children under 18 in the family. That's not a complete sentence, right? If we jump over to language arts, that didn't tell us anything. Each additional family member, comma, but also the number of children under 18 in the family. What happens? There's numbers involved. Something's going up, something's going down. You're not telling me anything. The third choice, one factor increases the poverty threshold, but the other factor decreases the poverty threshold. Yeah, that's not specific, right? So our best answer here, that if you were to explain that information in just a sentence or two, as families grow larger, so does poverty threshold. Each additional child, however, decreases it.
Great job. This response uses complete sentences to explain that poverty threshold increases as family size increases, but decreases for each additional child in the family.
All right, so let's keep going here.
So let's say I want to use textual data to create a visual presentation, like a chart or a graph. This is where scanning strategies can help. Take a look at this text. It's talking about voter participation in the 2016 presidential election. As you can see, there's a lot of information here. The first thing I want to do is find the groups that the data is reporting on. The text mentions 4. I'll go ahead and mark them in orange. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I have to locate the data used to describe these groups. There are 2 sets of data for each group, the data from 2016 and the data from 2012. I'll mark those in blue. How do I tell which data is from 2012 and which is from 2016? Maybe the words near the data can provide some hints. If data is described as being up to or down to, then the text is describing a change. That's probably the 2016 data. If the data is described as from, then that's what the data is changing from. So that's the 2012 data. Voter turnout for seniors, for example, is down to 71% in 2016 from its 2012 value of 72%. Now that I've identified the most relevant information, I can strip away everything else. There. Now I'm ready to fill in a graph. First, I plug in all the from data into the 2012 slots. Next, I fill in all the up to or down to data in the 2016 slots. Does this look right to you? The original text said that voter turnout went down for every age group except for one. My table seems to agree. Every age group had a lower turnout percentage in 2016 except for the 18 to 29 age group. That group's participation went up by 2%, so this looks right to me. Of course, a table is just one way to display data. What kind of visual presentation you choose depends on the kind of data you want to show. If you're working with percentages, you can't go wrong with a pie chart. Tracking changes over time, a line graph is a good choice. It's all about picking the right tool for the situation. So that's the basics. First, scan the text for the report groups. Second, identify the data associated with each group. Third, look for words that give you hints about the data. Fourth, plug the data into your visual presentation. Think you've got this? Why don't you give it a try?
This lesson and exercise is really about being detail oriented, and really, I've had to go back and forth. You have to look at the data, and there are some good tips here, right? So if you're looking at data, you're looking for specific things like this age group, right, or this number in a household. You could, start by scanning through it, and then you need to, identify, right? So what data, statistics or otherwise, is associated with that group. And signal words, all right? Just like you talked about in language arts, we talked about this in social studies. Look for those words, those phrases like up to, down to. That will, tell you which way data is moving. Is the number, or even increasing, decreasing, things like that. Which way numbers are moving. And then, if you have a visual presentation, that you're doing, that's, where you would organize it. Or, in our case, probably most likely, answering a question, like on a test. And the next one here.
Which line graph reflects the data described in the text?
Right. So applying, both text information and looking at graphical information. And this is where it is really, it's a bit tedious, right? You're going to have to possibly sort of go back and forth and look at each representation. So many residential and commercial end users choose to purchase their own solar photovoltaic systems and be responsible for its maintenance and operation. So basically solar panels, right? That's what we're talking about, solar energy. By owning their own system, they are able to self-supply their own green power. There's probably a lot of people in Columbus right now that wish they had some solar panels. Installed prices per watt for solar systems have declined significantly in the past decade, from about $9 per current watt in 2006 to $5 per current watt in 2012 to $4 per current watt or below in 2016. So our sort of text data here, right? That's what we're kind of targeting at first. So we have like three groups of information, and we have it dated. So $9 in 2006, $5 in 2012, $4 or below in 2016. So right away, before we try to find which visual data is going to match that, we know it's in the decline, right? Something's going from $9 down to $4 in the course of 10 years. Okay, so that's even before we look at any of the representations, we got our head around the idea of we're seeing something trending down, right? So when we look through our graphs, graph A, right? Okay, well, we see $9 up here. We see it get down to $4 in 2012. But wait, wasn't it $4 in 2016? So it started to go back up to $5. That doesn't track with our information, right? 2016, it should be down to $4 or less. So graph A doesn't sound like what our choice is going to be here. Graph B, okay, that continues to trend down over the course of our information, right? The 10-year span. $9, that's the correct amount. 2012, okay, that is $5. And then by 2016, dipped to another dollar or a little more, down to $4, right? Okay, we might have a winner here. Let's just look and see what we have. Oh, that's inverse, right? So it went from $4 up to $9 in 2016. That's a no-go, right? That's moving in the wrong direction. And this just has bad data, okay? Because it's incorrect. We started at $9. So that's wrong. $4 in 2012, also wrong, because we could go and look at our data again and know that it was $5 at that point. And it finished at a little under 4, not 3. So it looks like B is going to be our right answer. This one, you only had basically 3 data points that you needed to find, right? We already identified it's dropping. So that's getting us moving in the right direction. We know if we're looking at a bar graph, something like this, that it should be trending down. And then you have to double check, really an eye for detail, make sure our numerical values line up, right? So here, 9, 5, and 4 should get us the answer that we want. So graph B, let's take a look.
Great job. The price starts out at $9 WDC in 2006, then drops to $5 WDC in 2012, and finally falls to $4 WDC in 2016. This is exactly what the text describes.
And if you're working on this on quizzes or something like that, you could try to chart it. You might want to make some notes and things. Unfortunately, when it comes to taking your test with social studies, you're not really allowed any type of allowed to use any. Well, I think I'll double check on this. I know for language arts you can have a whiteboard. And of course, for math, I think you can have a whiteboard as well. I'm not sure for social studies. So if you'd want to actually jot down a few numbers or something, that might not be available. It is certainly not. If you take your GED test at home, I disagree with this completely. They're very strict on what you can do because you have to be on camera the whole time. You can't take any notes. You can't use anything outside of your computer. So it's something to keep in mind down the road when you guys are ready to take your test. Going to a testing center, you actually get a little more leeway because you can use some whiteboards because they can monitor you. We've had some problems with people taking tests at home where they think you're cheating or something or talking to somebody off camera, and they'll literally stop the test and make you restart or say you can't do this or that. So that's a little more information there. So let's start
now it's time to show that you've learned the
practice questions. So as always, there's 8 questions. Like we did yesterday, day before, we'll go ahead with like 15 minutes. We'll say just after 5 after 1. And I'm going to double check, make sure that is assigned for everybody. When we get started here, I will pause our recording. So for the first question, we got back to the poverty threshold chart. And let's see here. So it's asking you to respond in a full sentence again, or a couple sentences. A married couple lives with the wife's parents and has 2 young children. So you want to think about, okay, how many adults is that? How many children? So a married couple lives with the wife's parents. So a married couple, we're going to have 2. And then the wife's parents, we have 2 more, right? So, okay, we got 4 adults and has 2 young children. Yeah, 6, right? So we know we got 6 family members, 4 adults, 2 children. So we pull up our poverty threshold chart. 6 adults, or I'm sorry, 6 family members, right? Total family size, 6 members in the household, 2 children. Our poverty threshold is $35,000. Okay, so where is our best answer there? So yeah, family size for a family of 6 with 2 young children, right? The family would expect to have a poverty threshold of 35,000. So these other ones, you know, be careful, right? Because they're not giving you the correct information. You could actually, you wouldn't know the poverty level, the poverty threshold number, but based on the text, you know a lot of information, right? There's only, even then, like there's only 2 answers that's a family of 6, right? So you can eliminate that way. And then you realize, okay, well, there's only 2 young children. Virtually, you wouldn't even have to look at the chart to get the right answer here. But it is asking, you know, that's a very specific case. You know, don't rely on that on all questions. But right, it's a family of 6 with 2 children, and that's the only option available in here. But we also want to make sure that we know the right poverty threshold. That's 35,000. Okay. Yeah, and then which bar graph reflects the data described in the text. So this one, 2 counties exceed 4.5% employment growth. From 2014 to 2015, 2 American counties showed an employment growth of more than 4.5%. I won't, you know, read the whole thing here, but we want to look at the data, right, and the groups of data. San Francisco, California leads the pack, showing a staggering 6.6% growth. Riverside, California made a strong showing with 4.9% growth, just barely missing the 4.5%. The county of San Bernardino, California comes in 3rd with 4.4. Florida counties take up the remaining slots in the top 5. Hillsborough, Florida, and Broward, Florida, 4.3. Salt Lake City, 4.1. So this is largely a matching scenario, right? We need to make sure that whatever graphic information we're looking at matches up with those specific numbers. So what does that? This is where you might have to do a little back and forth. You know, if you can't remember all those numbers, we know what, you know, first look at. San Francisco was 6.6. San Bernardino was not 4.9. It was 4.4. So right away, we can eliminate graph A. Graph B, San Francisco, 6.6. Riverside, 4.9. Okay, that's right. San Bernardino, 4.4.
Yes.
Yeah, but the last 2, yeah. Broward and Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City was just 4.1.
4.1.
So there you go. Eliminate that one. Graph C, of course, that is the right one. So, right, and then 4.3, we don't even have Salt Lake City on there, but that's no big deal, right? It doesn't have to represent all the information. What it does represent has to be right. And then, of course, here again, we have some mixed up values because Salt Lake City was not 4.3. So this one in particular is one of those, you got to have a good eye for detail. Make sure that your numbers in the text are matching the numbers on your graph. And that's going to be C. All right. Okay, a widowed woman lives with her son, right? So we're back to the poverty threshold questions. So, you know, this you can even kind of count on your fingers, right? A widowed woman, 1 adult, lives with her son, 1 adult, his wife, 1 adult, and their 19-year-old child, another adult. Household of 4, no children, right? So here, right, already I'm seeing, well, yeah, it's A, right? That's the only one that has a family of 4 adults. The other ones are talking about children, or for a family of 3 adults with no children. Well, they're actually missing somebody in that scenario. And then the other one's wrong. But, just to make sure, we will look. And that'll actually help us fact check, right? That's sort of like checking our answer. So a family size of 4 with no adults should be 25,000 poverty threshold. And sure enough, right, this all matches. So we'll go with A here, family of 4 adults, no children, $25,000. Okay, what we got?
You're doing very well.
I'll keep going. All right, visual representation is the best choice for showing this data. Okay, so this is about movers. 2017, renters moved less than any year since 1988. But let's look at the numbers here, right? So a historic low of 21.7% in 2007 compared to 35.2% in 1988. So we can already start thinking, it's like, okay, it's been going down. 1988, 35.2, 2007, 21.7. So now we can start thinking about numbers. However, the most recent mover rate for renters, 21.7%, was higher than for owners, which was 5.5% in 2017. Now I can start thinking, it's like, okay, so renters move, and you can even think about this outside of that, right? Yeah, that sounds reasonable. It sounds logical. People that own homes probably move less than people who rent. Okay, so our renters move more, but they've moved less since 1988. So starting to think about what we're going to see here. This information, we are only thinking about statistical and data information. Probably in this case, this information here, this whole paragraph is going to be useful for us. It's basically explaining that information or presenting some type of inference about it. So here, okay, we got it restated. Housing related reason 43, family related reason. So this is why, what it does explain here in that passage, right? Why do people move? So that's actually something, maybe it might have been a little more important. I might have been getting ahead of myself. So why people move? So house related reasons, 43%. Family related reasons, 27.9, employment related reasons, 18.5, some other reason, 10.6. So presentation A, we have a pie chart. And so in this particular question, we have the data represented in several different ways. Pie chart, right, typically shows percentages. And they'll be, shaded different color, or shaded differently, or use different colors to represent that information. And that's a good visual, right, to sort of, take everything in as a whole. Presentation B, bar graph, right? So housing, 43%, family, somewhere under 30, employment, somewhere under 20, other, somewhere under, or around 10. Sort of like a plotted graph. Again, we see the information there. And then finally, just a table, right? So housing, family. So this is basically just restating it in the form that it was up here, right? That's just drawing lines around that information, basically. So what's the best visual representation? It's going to be the pie chart, because not only is it giving you the percentages, you get to see those slices of pie. So housing related reasons why people move, right? We see that big chunk of pie. Family being the next, employment being the next, and then other, representing that other whole there. So that representation is best for that type of percentile data. You get to see it all. You get to just take it all in at once. These, a little hard to look at, trying to get, exactly what's going on. The bar graph is probably the next best, though. right? Because you can see the difference there and you can see the trends. This is difficult because, you're like, you got your y-axis over here. You're like, okay, housing. The other problem is, you don't actually have exact numbers, right? That's over 40%, but you don't actually have it stated, right? There's no, it's not saying exactly how much it is. And here again, that's just restating it. There's nothing different about it. The pie chart gives you the greatest sort of representation where you can, not only see the numbers, the percentages, but you actually see how much of that whole in that form that it represents. Yeah, part of a whole. That's the best way. I can't remember. Pie charts are referred to. They give them another term. In our old program, they talked about them a different way. Or I mean, they call them pie charts from time to time, but there's another name they refer to them from time to time. I'll see if I can find that. Okay, so which response here? So incomplete sentences explain where New Mexico saw the largest population change. So we got a map of New Mexico. So always making sure that we understand what's being represented in our visual data, whether it's a map, chart, graph, pie chart, anything like that. So New Mexico, right? 2010 census results. Percent change in population by county, 2000 to 2010. Okay, now we know what's being represented on the map. But what does the different colors mean, right? So we go to our map legend or our map key. Our map key down here, percent change, right? Dark green, 46.3%. Light green, 10 to 20. Light green, 0 to 9.9%. And then we go into the negatives. So population that dropped in those counties. Light purple, 10 to up to 0.1% change, and 17.5 to negative 10.1% change. For the dark purple. So we're sitting here, we're looking at it, right? Okay, so we see a lot of growth here in Sandoval, Santa Fe, Bernardino, all these places, right? Valencia, Roosevelt, saw some growth. Then we saw a lot of change here in other areas. Harding, Quay, Hidalgo, those counties dropped a lot. So looking at our options here, the population of Sandoval grew most, right? And Harding, Quay, and Hidalgo counties shrank the most. So that is extremely accurate. The other stuff, many New Mexicans moved from Harding, Quay, and Hidalgo to Sandoval and counties near Sandoval. That's not what the question is asking. And we don't know that for sure. All we're seeing is percent changes. We would need more data. You could maybe draw a sort of a weak inference there that maybe the people that moved from one county moved to another county, but they could have also moved out of state, could have moved out of the country. Who knows? We don't have that data. Bad answer. The first option, Northwest New Mexico saw the greatest increase in population compared to the other three quadrants. Northwest, can't say that, right? Because everything here dropped, only San Juan County really increased. So that's incorrect. Harding, Quay, and Hidalgo each saw the greatest population. Nope, it's the exact opposite. So that leaves population of Sandoval, right? Okay. Accurately reflects the information described in the text. Okay, president budget versus Congress's budget. So budgets for those offices. So what we're looking for, right? Beginning, this is when you probably have to look at the whole text. Beginning in 2008 and continuing through 2012, Congress's budget was consistently larger than the president's budget. All right, so we're, already we can kind of summarize that. Congress's budget grew more so than the president's budget for the same years. In 2010, Congress submitted a budget that was $45 billion larger than the president's. By 2012, the congressional budget had grown to become $50 billion larger than the president's budget. So first off, we got to make sure that it's continuing to grow. Congressional budget here keeps going up. Here there's some change, but it's not continuous. Here also it continues to go up, but there's a problem with the numbers here. So 2010, we do see a difference of 45, was it billion? 45 million, $45 billion. So that's right. But over here, it was 50, right? And that's 100. So that's incorrect. So finally, our last table here, okay, consistently growing, outpacing the presidential budget. And then to double check, 2010, yep, it exceeds the presidential budget by 45 billion. By 2012, exceeding it by 50 billion. Continuous growth from 2007 to 2012, right? We see that, and then we can check the other numbers that they suggest there, 2010 and 2012. So table D is going to be our answer. Okay. Right. Incomplete sentences explain where the most poverty is found in the Western U.S. I have a like some map worksheets. I know that, you know, knowing the states, location of states might be a problem for a lot of people. It has been in the past with some of my students. And that's totally understandable. Lots of people struggle with geography. I will put that up because you're going to have to know the states, and there's not a lot of great ways to know the names. In Google Classroom, I have a video that I'll put up and like a worksheet to help you learn names of states. But, you know, with map information, you might get a map that looks like this, and then they'll ask you about, you know, Missouri or something, or Texas. So you got to know your state names. In this case, we are looking at, it's U.S. citizens in poverty. And then, you know, the color-coded states here. So 7.6 to 11.3, 11.3 to 13.8, 13.8 to 16.4, 16.4 to 21%, right? So light to dark, right? Lightest colors, less poverty, darker colors, more poverty. And then what it specifically asks us, you know, incomplete sentences, explain where the most poverty is found in the Western U.S. So here we're also talking about, it's a little bit arbitrary where we say the West starts, but typically, you know, Texas and, you know, Colorado. So this side from, you know, Texas on, all of this was considered the West. This is like the Great Plains states, right? Kansas, Nebraska. But over here, that is the West. So it appears to be in the South, right? New Mexico, Arizona, some Nevada, and California, and Texas, which is generally considered the Southwest United States. So highest in Southwest, and with the highest poverty in New Mexico, right? So everything else is outside of that. In the Western U.S., poverty is concentrated in the North. No, right? That is not Oregon, Washington and Oregon. Washington actually has pretty low rate, so does Oregon. In the Western U.S., poverty is concentrated in the middle with the highest poverty in Colorado. So see, this is what I'm talking about. You have to know your states. You know, this helps out because it says Denver, right? So, you know, that's in Colorado, but that's also a low turnout. In the Western U.S., poverty is concentrated in the Northwest. Also, no, right? Seattle, Washington. It does seem to try to help you out here by giving you some of those cities. to help you identify the states. But the best thing to do is learn the location of the states. So U.S. poverty is concentrated in the Southwest. And then visual presentation is the best choice for showing this data. So voter participation, talking about 1964, 66% of Americans 65 or older voted for a president. By 88, this number had risen to 70%. By 2012, this number has held steady at around 70. Middle-aged Americans aged 45 to 64 have experienced a slight decline. In 64, 76% of middle-aged Americans voted. This number dropped to 69 in 88, just below the participation of seniors. By 2012, their participation had dropped to 63%. And again, youngest Americans. So, looking at our information here, what best presents this information? So it is D, okay. Here, this bar graph, what doesn't even have any numbers? Yeah, it doesn't. No. Okay. This is difficult to look at and discern anything. The bar graph, although it's complicated, right? It's very easy to select each number and see how it's represented, right? So our timeline here from 64 to 2012, right? We see the drop. We see age 65 plus, increasing a little bit up to 70%. So it's, it's easier to look at and find individual lines there. So if I want to say, okay, well, what about 45 to 64-year-olds? Okay, well, they were under 80% in 1964. They've been declining ever since 2012. They were just over 60%. So that is presentation D. All right. Okay, so finishing up here.
As I said, we live in the information.
So, really have to kind of, pump the brakes when you look at this information and just think about, those types of signal words, if it says it's increasing, decreasing, up to, down from, things like that. And then start thinking about what way the data is moving. Right. A lot of times these statistics are telling you, something's moving up or something's moving down, and then grouping them accordingly. When you can do that, right, then you can start thinking about turning that information into text. So that's largely what it was, right? So yesterday we started thinking about, looking at visual data, looking at different types, and then trying to explain what you read, right? So that's largely how that lesson continued today. Any questions on communicating data?
I have a question, but it's just like with the test overall.
Mhm.
With those type of questions like that, will they have like the graph next to it so we don't have to like keep clicking and going to different pages, like where we could just look at it side by side?
I think in most cases, yeah. Or it'll be a little easier just to scroll up and down. I know here, where you have the passage that you have to, click on and open, the test won't be that way. No, it'll probably be above it. Or I know in certain circumstances, you'll have the information on the side and you'll be able to answer on like in the corner. So yeah, I know that's a big problem, right? Is having to sort of bounce back and forth and look at things. So that's, one tip there is, trying to sort as much of the information ahead of time as you can as you're scanning and reading it, and at least start thinking about sort of the major themes and, which way the data is moving or which value, you might not have to remember the exact number, but like, okay, was there more senior voters than young voters, right? And then to start, kind of mapping that out a little bit in your head, all right?
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, let's go ahead and stop for a break and we'll jump into language arts. We're doing RLA reading today. And we'll go ahead and take about 10 minutes or so and jump back in around 10:41, 10:42, something like that. All right, y'all take 10 and we'll see you in language arts. Bye.